this is a tale I learned from Joseph Jacobs' collection called English Fairy Tales. He also has more English fairy tales, Celtic fairy tales, more Celtic fairy tales. You see a trend going on there. And I'm fascinated with the story. It is a variation, really, on the 12 Dancing Princesses, if you're familiar with that. Except it's all turned around. Instead of dancing princesses, it's a dancing prince. There once was a king and a queen, as has often happened. And this king and queen each had a daughter by an earlier marriage. And these two stepsisters loved each other, as if there was no step between them. But the queen was jealous of Anne's looks, the king's daughter, because she was so much bonnier than her own daughter, Katie, who was plain looking. And jealousy is a terrible thing. And it drove the queen to decide to destroy Anne's good looks. She went to the henwife. The henwives were known for practicing in the dark arts, and took counsel with her. And the henwife said, "Send Anne to me in the morning, fasting, and I will see what I can do." Well, the next morning, the queen said to Anne before breakfast, "Go down to the henwife and bring us back some eggs." Well, dutiful daughter that she was, off she went, but she went through the kitchen before leaving the castle and grabbed a crust of bread and nibbled on that on the way to the henwife, and so she arrived not fasting. And the henwife said, "Lift the lid and look inside that pot, and we will see what we will see." Well, Anne did that, but nothing happened. And the henwife said, "Tell the queen to look closer after her larder. I have no eggs today." Anne went back, relayed the message, and the queen understood what the henwife was saying. So the next morning, when she sent Anne for eggs, she followed her out of the castle. But as she was traveling down the road, there were some country people picking peas beside the road, and well, Anne was so friendly, she stopped to talk with them, and everyone loved Anne and gave her some peas to nibble on. So again, she was not fasting when she came to the cottage. But again, she lifted the lid, and nothing happened, and now the henwife was angry. She said, "Tell the queen the pot won't boil if the fire is away. I have no eggs today." Anne related that strange message, but the queen knew. The next day, Anne and the queen went down to the henwife's cottage. And this time, Anne was fasting. And the henwife said, "Lift the lid and look inside, and we will see what we will see." Well, when she did, she looked inside. Her head fell into the boiling pot. And out of the pot jumped a sheep's head and attached itself to her shoulders. The queen was satisfied. Katie was appalled at what her mother had done to her dear Anne. She wrapped the poor girl's head in white linen, and that night, under the shelter of darkness, she and Anne left the castle, never to return. They went out into the world for good or for ill. They traveled through the night and far into the next day until they came to another realm. And at the castle of that realm, Katie asked for food and shelter for herself and her sick sister. It was granted by the cook, who befriended Katie and gave her the job as scullery maid. And this is why Katie and Anne survived. Although she was only a lowly scullery maid, she was privileged to the castle's gossip. And from this she learned that this king and queen had 2 sons, one of whom was wasting away in some mysterious illness that the doctors could not cure. It appeared he was dying of exhaustion. And stranger still, whoever stayed up with him during the night to see to his needs, the next morning had disappeared. The king offered a peck of silver to anyone who would stay up with his son and solve this mystery. Well, Katie was a brave girl, and she agreed she would try. They gave her a seat by the hearth, where she could plainly see the prince lying in his bed. The king and queen gave her their wishes, their blessings, and then they left her there. Well, all went well until midnight, as Katie heard the bells of the church chiming. The prince sat up, got dressed, left the room, Katie following him down the hall, down a back staircase, out a small door, down a path to the stable, where he saddled his horse, called his hounds, and Katie jumped up in the saddle behind him, though he seemed not to notice her. And on they went into the greenwood, where the boughs were so close that Katie reached out and picked nuts from the trees and put them in her apron. After a time, they came to a tall hillock covered with grass. And the prince rode his horse 3 times, whiter shine of the moon around the mound. And on the 3rd pass, he called out, "Open, door, open, for the prince, his horse, and his hounds." And Katie said, "And his lady behind." And a door that had not been there before opened in, and in went the prince. Now, perchance, you have never been in a fairy mound. In this fairy mound, there was a courtyard, a small courtyard. Katie jumped off and hid behind the door, just in time as the door at the far end opened up. And out came light and music and fairies. And the fairies surrounded the prince and took his hands, and as many as could touch him, they led him into the great hall, where they began to dance with the prince. They danced and they danced as Katie watched from the courtyard. And he danced and he danced and he danced until he collapsed on the floor, and the fairies picked him up and set him on a couch and fanned him till he came around, and they danced him again. And this went on all night until through the open door Katie heard the cock crow, and so did the prince. He ran out of the hall, jumped onto his horse, called to his hounds. Katie jumped on behind. Away they went back through the greenwood, back to the castle and saddled the horse, ran up the path, crawled up the stairs on all 4s, undressed himself, and collapsed into bed. In the morning, when the king and queen came in, they were very pleased to see Katie sitting by the fireplace, roasting nuts, cracking them, and eating the kernels. "How did it go?" said the king. "It went well," said Katie. "I learned a thing or 2. But I will not stay up another night unless I get a peck of gold." The king readily agreed. So that night, at midnight, the prince rose, dressed down the hall, down the stairs, along the path to the stable, onto his horse, Katie jumping behind him. Back they went through the greenwood, Katie reaching out and picking nuts and putting them in her apron. They came to the mound 3 times. They rode around and called out, and the door opened in, and in they went. Katie hid behind the door again, as the fairies came out and took him by the hands, and as many as could touch him into the great hall they went. Katie knew that they would be dancing him to death all night. She had to know more. So silently, she crept into the hall, staying in the shadows away from the torches and the candles, until she came to another door she could hide behind. And not far away were 3 fairy women who were sitting, watching the dancing. And with them was a toddler fairy. And he was carrying a little wand. And she heard one of the fairy women say, "Ah, if Katie only knew. 3 strikes of that wand, and Anne's beauty would return." Well, Katie took one of the nuts out of her apron, rolled it across the floor, and the toddler saw it and came over and picked up the nut, and she rolled another, not as hard. And he came closer and he picked up that nut and another nut, and he picked up another and another. And well, he had so many nuts in his hand, he had to set down the wand to pick up the last nut. And Katie reached out, took the wand, put it in her apron, and slipped back out into the courtyard. When morning came, out ran the prince, jumped on his horse, Katie behind, dashing through the greenwood back to the castle, up the path, crawling up the stairs, and he collapsed into bed. But Katie went to the bedroom where she and Anne slept, and with 3 taps of the wand on the sleeping Anne, the sheets had disappeared and her former beauty had returned. When the king and queen came to the prince's bedroom, there was Katie, roasting, cracking nuts, and eating the kernels. "How was this evening?" he asked. "Better," said Katie, "but I'll not stay a 3rd night and solve this mystery unless I can marry the prince." The king thought about this, and Katie looked like his only hope to save his son. So he agreed. Again, that night at midnight, the prince rose, dressed, down the hall, out to the stable, and again they rode through the greenwood, Katie picking nuts from the trees, putting them in her apron, into the fairy mound, and again she snuck into the hall behind that door, and there were the 3 fairy women and that toddler, this time carrying a little birdie in his hand. And the fairy woman said, "Oh, if Katie only knew. 3 bites of that birdie, and the prince's curse would be broken." Well, out came the nuts rolling across the floor. First one nut, then another and another, and the toddler got closer and closer, picking up the nuts until he had so many he had to put down the birdie before he picked up that last nut. Before he could fly away, Kitty reached out and grabbed it, put it in her pocket, and back out into the courtyard. When the sun rose, out came the prince again, onto the horse, back through the greenwood to the castle. And this time, after he collapsed in bed, she plucked the feathers from the birdie, put it on a spit, and began to roast it over the fire. In a little while, a savory odor filled the air, and the prince's eyes opened, and he called out to Katie, Oh, if I could have just a bite of that birdie." She took it off the spit, went over to his bed and sat down and gave him a piece of the birdie. He sat up on his elbows and said, Oh, please, another bite of that birdie." She gave him a second bite. Now he sat up in bed and said, "If you love me, give me another bite." And she gave him the rest of the birdie. And when he had eaten it, he stood up, hale and hearty. Now when the king and queen came into the bedroom, there was Katie and the prince sitting by the fire, roasting and cracking nuts and eating the kernels. Well, the king was true to his word, and the banns of marriage were announced. But in the meantime, the prince's younger brother had discovered Anne. And just like everybody else, fell in love with her. And he wished to marry. When Kate explained to the king that both she and her sister Anne were of royal blood, he had no objections. And so it was, a double marriage. The well prince marrying the sick princess, and the sick prince marrying the well princess. And they lived long and well and happily, and never once drank from an empty cup. Thank you.
This is called the contest between the sun and the wind. It started out a perfectly splendid day. The birds were cheerfully building their nests with a chirp, chirp, chirp. The bees were busy buzzing from flower to flower. And the sun and the wind were relaxing high up in the sky. They lazily watched as a man wearing a warm coat made his way down a winding road. Well, the wind quickly grew bored of being still and boasted with a blustery gust, "Son, you do know I am the strongest one of us two. Oh, I am so much stronger than you." "Oh, really?" asked the sun. "Is that so? Well, then I challenge you to a contest of strength. Let us see who can get that man to take off his coat." Well, the wind howled with laughter and bellowed, "Oh, that's much too easy. First, I'll huff, then I'll puff, and I'll blow him to the brim. I'll rip that coat right off of him. I'll push him against the trees. I'll take off his coat with ease." So the wind huffed and he puffed down that winding road. Well, the breeze made large ripples in a puddle and billowed out the man's coat like a cape. Well, the man just put his coat shut, folded his arms across his chest, and kept walking. So the wind sent a clap of thunder so loud, a bolt of lightning so bright, and a blustery gust with all of his might. He mixed in dark gray clouds and a blast of cold air. This bent the flowers and tall grass flat against the ground and sent dust, dirt, leaves, birds, bees swirling, twirling around. The day turned gray. The man shivered as he caught his breath. Cold tears trickled down his face. He quickly buttoned up his coat to the chin, flipped his collar up to stop the whistling wind. He thrust his hands into his pockets and he scurried down that winding road. This made the wind very angry. This contest was no longer fun. He needed that coat off now so he could beat the sun. So he roared such a mighty roar that it swayed the tallest of trees, bent their long limbs back with ease, and sent that man stumbling, fumbling, tumbling backwards. The man stood up straight. He put his head down and pushed through that wind that hurled him around. The wind stopped blowing. Then he decided to moan. Then he groaned. It didn't matter how hard he blew. It didn't matter how strong his gust. The man's coat remained on. The wind knew he was defeated. Discouraged, he blustered off in a huff. was a train whistle. I didn't plan this. The air was still and quiet. The sun popped out from behind a large gray cloud. She shined bright to warm the chilly air and frosty ground. The man on the road slowed down, lifted his smiling face to the sun, and put down his collar. The birds started to cheerfully fix their nests with a chirp, chirp, tweet. The sun shined brighter. The man on the road felt warm, and he unbuttoned his coat. Oh, and the busy bees began to buzz again from flower to flower. So the sun shined brighter, and it became warmer and warmer. The man on the road felt so hot, he took off his coat and laid in a shady spot. The wind blew in and announced, I huffed, and I puffed, and I blew him to the brim. But I could not take that man's coat from him. I cannot imagine that you were able to either. Well, the wind stopped spouting his hot air long enough to look down on the ground. And there, lying under a tree, was the man. And underneath his head was his coat, all nice and neatly folded, like a pillow. Well, how did you force him to take off his coat? I didn't force him at all, Wind. I simply lit up the day. Through gentleness and kindness, I won my way. There must have been some trick. Wind, being gentle, being kind, it's not a trick. It is a choice and a skill. Would you like me to show you? The sun beamed. Thank you very much.
So I would like to invite you to create with me tonight. The creation story has some refrains that happen again and again. The first one is, and it was so. Can you say that with me?
And it was so.
Very good. Next one, and God saw that it was good.
And God saw that it was good.
At the end of the story, 2 thumbs up, and it was very good.
And it was very good.
And finally, and there was evening, and there was morning, and then whatever day it is, I'll put my fingers up. First day, second day. Can we try that? And there was evening, and there was morning, first day. All right. I knew I had a great audience here. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while the wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Then God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, to separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. It was so. God called the dome sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together she called seas. And God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and fruit trees of every kind that bear fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the sky to separate day from night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and for years. And let them be lights to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. And God made the stars. And God saw that it was good. God set the two great lights in the sky to give light upon the earth, to separate the day from the night, and to rule over the day and over the night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth, across the sky." And it was so. God had to think a minute, and he said, birds? And God said, let the waters teem with living creatures. Let them swarm and swim. And so, God created the great whales and every living creature that lives in the waters. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of every kind. And it was so. God created the wild animals, creeping things that creep across the earth, the birds, and the cattle. And God saw that it was good. And God said, He said, what did God say? God said, He said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. Fill the earth. Fill the earth. And there is evening, and there is morning. The sixth day, but not quite, because God wasn't done yet on that sixth day. He decided to create humankind and said, let us create humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them take care of the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, and everything that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind. Male and female, she created them. In the image of God, she created them. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and learn how to live in harmony with it. Take care of the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and everything that lives and moves on the earth. See, I've given you every green plant for food. And God looked on all that she had made, and it was
Very good.
very good. And there was evening, and there was morning. Now the sixth day. And on the seventh day, God rested from all the work that she had done. Thank you.
This first one's called Strange Astronomy. I learned astronomy from a professor with an unusual take on the existence of life on our planet. He said that if you look at every other celestial body as far out as we can perceive, you will see rocks and gases and nothing more. Certainly not life. Think of that as your baseline. Now look at our planet's history. Poor Mother Earth develops an oxygen atmosphere, and then comes fire, inflammation. And that is the first symptom. Then, out of nowhere, there are these little organisms attacking each other and crawling all over her, battling for dominance within her system. Her natural defenses kick in and try to squash them out, but no matter how many harsh climates, earthquakes, tsunamis, or volcanic eruptions she throws at them, they keep on multiplying and multiplying. Now they're attacking her in their efforts to survive and thrive, drilling her flesh, poisoning her blood, choking her with their excrement, killing her by degrees. Eventually, they learn to move beyond her to other celestial bodies. The moon already shows signs of infection. This thing is contagious now. Okay, my professor didn't actually say all of that. He just said a tiny portion of it, and my mind in the intervening years has played it on repeat endlessly, obsessively, building upon it each time. I think the actual quote was just something like, "The Earth has a cold, and someday she'll get over it." Which I suppose is true, unless, of course, her case of humanity turns out to be terminal. And honestly, when you take out the human ego, can you really be mad about it? All things pass eventually, time moves on, cycles continue, and new things emerge. Dead trees feed and protect insects, elders die to make way for new births. Death feeds life, and this is the system that was built, and theoretically, there is no reason it can't work that way on an infinite number of levels. I'm sure most people will hate this concept on principle, because as humans, we can't imagine existence without us. We can't envision a universe where we aren't here, struggling to survive. The dinosaurs probably couldn't either, but here we are. The whole thing makes me wonder, how important do the viruses that infect us, or the worms that consume our decaying flesh, think they are amidst the whole of the ever-expanding universe? Okay, this next one is called Bag. I mistook it for an animal at first, some bizarre beige beast skittering across the street, but no, it was just your basic, boring bag, stuck in the spiral swirl of city street breezes. Unless it was an animal. Some sentient species hailing from a strange society of aliens with simulated beige bag skin. Perhaps it was sent to explore the human habitats of Earth, preparing to terraform them, regenerate, and repopulate after we've burned it all to the ground. Or maybe it was just a basic, boring bag. But could it have been AI animated? A secret bag-covered spy balloon sent by enemies of the state, by foreign powers hoping to infiltrate and permeate and debilitate our infrastructure. Perhaps it will reveal itself as a rocket-launching drone with a deceptive, discarded debris exterior, designed to disappear flawlessly into any urban environment. The potential applications for war are terrifying. I seek out this unknown that has intruded upon my psyche. I snatch it from its flight. There are no metallic machinations within, no fleshy alien form. It's just a basic, boring bag. I toss it into the trash, feeling a little more secure than before. But not really. What do you think, one more? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
This one is called My Favorite Spring Flowers. My favorite spring flowers are the tiny purple ones. Though the little white ones are nice too. But I guess the color and the size isn't really important, because my favorite spring flowers are the ones that appear suddenly where they aren't supposed to be. In the grassy medians between the sidewalk and the street, in the still snow-desecrated flower beds that lay dormant and dead, or in the barren patches of dirt where even the brown grass won't venture. My favorite spring flowers are the ones that spread their faces to the sun well before their carefully manicured cousins, well before the spade and the potting soil graces the scenes. The ones that jump out and say, "Screw all this wintry bullshit. We've had just about enough of all that." I am always predisposed to love the things that are in the wrong place at the right time. The little surprises that thrust themselves into your life where they don't seem to belong because you haven't yet realized that you needed them to be there.
So this is skunk clearing. The animals know what he seeks. He taps his foot to alert the skunk. He wants to track asteroids. Rural bushes rustle. He is allowed to stay. He finds the light past cities, past morning, whose beam of patience never breaks, past muddy Milky Way dreams of the someday house with the someday astronomer's backyard, his page, his sky, focus and magnify. For now, he packs the car, drives 4 miles, dances telescope angles in Forks Township woods, plots findings and farewells to 50, and the astronomer's certificate. Hermantaria, he whispers, as he logs that elusive asteroid in his journal. New Mexico, murmurs the eastern Pennsylvania wind, or the skunk. And this one is it's a haiku, so it's supposed to be 17 syllables. It's actually 16 syllables. You're allowed to cheat and go downward. You're not allowed to have more than 17, I don't think. So, I think I heard my first official robin actually on Earth Day. I was kind of far away, but I was pretty sure it was a robin, and we'd probably get some closer up pretty soon. We have quite a few birds in my neck of the woods these days. He chirps before 5, rain or shine. He knows how singing shapes the world. And the poem about trees is a poem called Birch. I knew you were God, calmly standing alone in early spring grass, whole at your base, Trinity above, twisted, sincere. 3 rough-fingered hands reached, palms up. You were not tall, not smooth, not straight, not afraid. I read your carved life of wrinkled parchment. It said, this is how it really is, and it is enough. Touch me and remember. And I'm going to sneak one more in just because I'm here. And this is actually kind of working. I never thought I'd ever be able to use a microphone and read. It's really pretty cool. I sound very strange to myself, though. Anyway, this is, some of you will remember these events, I bet. It's called Unusual. Underground, the earth shakes. Unexpected, you wonder what causes such vibrations. Unaware, you blame wind or a large truck. Unruly minute, but foundations hold. Unnerved, you turn on the news. Unavoidable, not to note your first earthquake's history. Unclear if you feel or imagine aftershocks. Undeniable cosmic lesson, understanding that another mystic event will uncolor the sky next Monday. Unwelcome that this might be your last eclipse. United States won't see totality for 20 years. Unfiltered awe while wearing glasses. Unfolding theories and science. Unique week of what is beyond you. Thank you.
Appreciate everybody's work. It's you know, it's connection, right? Creation and wonder. You know, and it's all put together, and that's what we're doing here tonight. You know, when Denise was putting this together, she asked me if I wanted to do this, and I said, first she asked me if I wanted to do it in the wintertime. I said no, I don't like to go out in the winter. You know, and I said, how about in the spring? And she said, okay, you know. And so then she's saying to me, well, what story would you tell? We're gonna do this thing, maybe Earth thing, you know. And I didn't know. I said, I don't know. I have to think about it. Depends on, you know, audience, this and that, and you know. And I'll let you know. And she said, well, you better let me know. I'm thinking, why is she, you know, getting on my case about what story I'm going to tell? You know? And so I did. I first was going to tell a story called The Tiger's Whisker, which I really like. I like the story. It's a neat story. You know? And I have a mentor, Utility Bill. Some of you guys know him, all right? Utility Bill. And I call him and I say, I'm thinking of telling a story. And I tell him the story, and he goes, yeah, it's a good story. He says, but you should think about it a little more. You know, that's his way of saying, you know, And then I thought, well, I couldn't figure out what story. And I finally said, I'll do The Stringed Child. And this is why I picked this story. Right? We're going to have to go back a little bit till when I was 43, soon to be 44. All right. And I was going through this period in my life of change, you know, and kind of not darkness, but you know, just one of them periods in your life where things aren't the way they're supposed to be, I guess. I don't know, or what you think. So anyhow, then I was working, I was teaching, you know, and I was off in the summertime. So I would go along the bike path, you know, that runs from Stockertown all the way up to Penarville. And I would walk there. There's an area like midway, you could park your car and you could walk. And I would walk there early in the morning, and I'd see these spider webs, right? And they had these little drops of dew on them. And they looked like tiny little pearls, you know, and they glistened in the sun. And they showed you the whole structure of the spider web. And I said, what? This is amazing. These spider webs are like architects, you know, they make these webs and then all these little drops. And I'd walk past them, and then when I came back, you couldn't see them. You know, they like disappeared because the sun burned off the dew, and the sun's now moved, and it changed the lighting, and you couldn't see these spiders webs, you know. And I thought, that's amazing too, you know. So I was going through that gloom and doom types thing, you know, like the creation story, you know, like the light and the dark, and it's always there within ourselves, you know. And I'm walking in nature and all that kind of stuff, and I'm thinking about that. So that got me, all right. From that point on, I started to change, and that's when I met my lovely wife, Barbara, right? And she, when we got married, she's the one who said to me, you know, they're having a storytelling event at the bookstore in Easton. What was the name of that bookstore? Quadrant, right? And we met Lisa Fasciaponte there, right? And from Lisa Fasciaponte, right, she told me about Mary Wright, right, and it's Peggy Pettick, or whatever. And they were having this workshop thing on storytelling at the what was the name of that?
Library?
Charlie, you were there.
The Northampton Community College?
No, it's right up the street,
Library.
across the river.
Or library.
No, Godfrey's part of my story, but it doesn't matter. I'm old. Touchstone Theater. Okay.
Okay,
So we were in Touchstone Theater, doing this stuff, and that's where I met Charlie, right? And that's where I met Karen. Where's Karen? I don't know where Karen's sitting. Karen, right? And that's how the Lehigh Valley Storytellers Guild started. So it's like a spider web, you see? It's like all these connections and things, you know, and that's what they're talking about. Connection.
Come on.
This connection to creation. Right? Connection to the creation is a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. And we all have that. We all have that, you know. And that's where it is. Connection, creation, and wonder. Right? And we all have that ability. And sometimes we forget. We're in that gloom and doom, that period of change, or the period of sorrow, or the period of whatever. You know, when we're all screwed up, you know. And we need that, you know, type of thing. So, but we can change through changing, which is hard, you know. And So this story that I want to tell you, also, because of Earth Day and Arbor Day, Arbor Day, the first official Arbor Day was in Nebraska City, Nebraska. Oh, I guess it was. And this guy, Jules Sterling Morton, all right, got the kids in all the schools to go plant trees, all right. And you know what year that was? 1885. Yeah. Way back then, they did this thing. And I read about this Morton guy, and he wasn't always that great a guy. Yeah. He was a congressman, and different stuff, but he did some neat stuff, but he wasn't all that cool, He was a racist. So anyhow, people are laughing at me. So, and then Earth Day, you know when that started? Anybody know? 1970, right? Okay, and then they started that because of a congressman, again, another guy, right, who was a Democrat, and he got annoyed with the different things, and he thought this would be a day to set aside to educate kids on how we should take care of the earth. That was the idea behind the whole deal, right? And it turned out to be a great big thing. The very first Earth Day, I don't know, there was like 20,000 people got involved or something, the very first one, And so it's very interesting, how these things come about, and we still celebrate them, right? And Earth Day is the 22nd, of April, and that was the birthday of this guy Morton. Oh gosh. And it's just amazing to me how these things intertwine. Right? Now the story I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you a story eventually. Ray's laughing at me. I want to tell you a story about Ray. All right? Ray and his wife Mary Ellen and Barbara and I were down Atlantic City, right? And we went down here to the speaker down. We're down Atlantic City, and we're standing outside. Ray and I are standing outside the casino, and Barbara and Mary Ellen, they're off buying something or going to the bathroom or something, right? And Ray and I are standing there, and this lady, who's dressed kind of provocatively, I guess you could say. All right. She comes up and she's like, and she says, "How you doing, fellas?" I say, "Okay." And she says, "I'm a working girl. I'll do anything for $100. Ray says, "You think you can paint my garage?" That's the way Ray is. Ray was going to wear this shirt tonight. It was a Philly shirt, and Ray just turned 88 years old. All right. And on the back, all right, it's Birch is his last name, right? And it's Birch 88 on the back of this Phillies T-shirt, right? Because he's a Philly guy, And I said, "Where's your shirt? I thought you were going to wear your shirt." He said, "Oh, I was in a car, I got car sick, and I puked all over it." Had to change my shirt. Who else can I embarrass? Anyhow, so the reason why I want to tell this story here also, right, is that the very first storyteller that I ever heard say he was a storyteller, all right, was Michael Parent, right, who just passed away not too long ago. And he was a great storyteller. And I saw him at Godfrey Daniels. Right? Now I saw Utah Phillips there, and I saw, Gamble Rogers there. you know, and Roy Bookbinder, and they were all great storytellers, but they're billed like as, you know, singer-songwriters and blues guys or whatever. You know, the music is first and then storytelling is second. But Michael I'm a storyteller, right? And I thought, this is amazing, this is pretty neat. You know? So he told the story that I'm gonna tell you. That's where I learned this story from Michael Parent, right? And this was back. And then after I saw Michael Parent at Godfrey Daniels, I saw Elizabeth Ellis and Gail Ross, and they were called the 12 Moon Storytellers. And they were just fantastic. And I got to, you know, have a relationship with Elizabeth Ellis. She came to our festival, and I got to know her through different workshops, and a big influence in my telling. So, and the very first time I told to an audience, you know, as a storyteller, was here at the Ice House down there. So it's all connected. So I'm done. Thanks for coming. Long ago in Canada, French Canadian people, they lived there, and they lived in parishes, right? And the parish priest had a lot to do with the community, right? They were also kind of part of the government in a way, you know? And they had, you know, a lot of power, and people respected them and everything. And there was an old, and not that old, but at that time, and he was a trapper and a fisherman and a hunter, right? And every morning he would go out. He and his son, he had his son Pierre, and his son was about maybe 14-ish, you know, early teens, and he would help his dad to set trap and, you know, and catch fish and stuff. But every morning they would catch a mess of trout, right? And they would give this string of trout to the parish priest every morning for his breakfast. And one day, you know, the trapper says to his son, Pierre, take this string of trout over to the priest, you know, in honor for, you know, his breakfast and reverence to the priest. Right? And the boy says, you know, I don't want to do that. He says, well, Pierre, what do you mean you don't want to do that? He said, every day we take the fish over to the priest, every day. You know, I mean, why must we do it every day? Well, there's other people that give him things, you know. And didn't we give him, you know, some venison the other week? And didn't we give him some quail that we had, you know? Why do we do this every day? And he said, because he's the priest, the parish priest. It's in reverence to do to the priest. He said, I don't want to do it. He said, look, I'm the papa, you are the son. Take the trout and go to the priest now. And the boy picks up the string of trout and he puts it over his shoulder and he goes over to the parish priest's cabin and he just barges in. And he takes the fish and he throws it down on the table. He doesn't say a word. He turns around and he starts to walk out. The priest says, excuse me, young man, boy, come here. And then young Pierre goes over and says, yes. He says, that is no way to give a gift. And the boy just shrugs. The priest says, let me show you how to give a gift. I'll pretend that I am you, and you pretend that you are me. Do you understand? And the boy nods. So the priest takes the string of trout, and he goes outside, closes the door, knocks on the door, and the boy yells, come in! The priest opens the door with the string of trout in his hand, and he walks over to the boy, pretending to be the priest. And he says, here you are, Reverend Father. Here's a nice string of trout for your breakfast, you know, and to honor you. And the boy looks at the string of trout, goes in his pocket, he takes out $1. And he motions this to the priest. And the priest goes, "Ah, I understand now why you have this resentment. I understand." And he says, "Okay." And he sets the trout down on the table and he says, "Now, listen to me, son." And he goes up to the mantle on his fireplace and he gets this jar and he fishes his hand in the jar and he brings out $25 and he puts it on the corner of the table and he puts it there. Right? And he goes in again and he brings out a shiny 50-cent piece and he puts it in the middle on the quarters in the corner and the 50-cent pieces here. And then he gets $1 and he puts $1 on the other corner. So there's a quarter, 50 cents, and $1. He says, "Now, son, if you choose the quarter, you will go to the Heavenly Father. Now, if you choose the 50 cents, you will go in between, in purgatory. But if you choose the $1, you will go below and burn in hell. Now, which one will you choose?" And the boy looks at the quarter, and he looks at the 50 cents, and he looks at the $1, and he looks at the priest. And again, he looks at the quarter, and he looks at the 50 cents, he looks at the $1, he looks at the priest, and with one swoop, he grabs all three and shoves them in his pocket, and he says, "Now I can go anywhere I want." Thank you.
When I think about the Nile River and what it's done for me, when I think about water and how it set me free, I just dance, sing, yell, scream, water, 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 water. Oh, when I think about the Nile River and what it's done for me, when I think about water and how it set me free, I just dance, sing, yell, scream, water, 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 water. We used to work with water, worship water, praise water, give thanks to the water gods. Yimiya Oshun claimed that water was life. Because when it came down from Mother Earth, overflowing our river bends, our crops would grow, grow, grow. That meant food to nourish our souls. We cried salty tears of joy, because when that blue liquid heaven came, we could now reclaim our livelihood. Our famine no longer existed. Our thirst was quenched. Our sense no longer stitched, and we could live again, bathe again, sing, Funga alafia, ashe, ashe, sing that. Funga alafia, ashe, ashe, Funga alafia, ashe, 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 ashe. Yeah, we could even dance the funky chicken again without worrying about falling out in dehydration, because our cracking bones were mended at the river bends. And not just us, but our animals too. They could breathe again, roam again, fertilize our lands again. Beavers and their dams were our old flood protection system, one that worked with nature. We didn't try to alter water's course. We followed it and let it lead us to the promised land. We didn't try to alter water's course. We followed it, let it lead us to the promised land. We understood how to work with water, how to properly use water and replenish our water-depleting bodies. Back then, Water was sacred. Water was everything to and for us who are made up of 55 to 65% water, about 83% running through our blood, 75% making up our brain and our heart, and almost 70% found in our muscles, 31% in the average human body's bones. Us warm-blooded beings knew that water was the element from which all beings came and returned. This is what we knew about water in relation to ourselves, but how drastically things have changed. Today, many cities are plagued with water contamination, lead levels higher than any one of us could ever imagine. Brown, yellow, red, orange, green, black colors, residents see coming from out of their faucets, and low-income neighborhoods are suffering the most. Why should anyone, regardless of their socioeconomic status, be subject to poison when brain deterioration, mental instability, and death are the end result? You agree?
Yeah.
Here lies the harsh reality. If we do not depend on water the way that we used to, by 2030, half of our world population will be negatively impacted. We need to go back to our native indigenous ways and worship water, praise water, perhaps give thanks to the water gods, Yemiya, Oshun, or whatever you want to call them. Because we can live without a lot of things. Walmart, Target, Sam's Club, Amazon, Temu, whatever you want to call it, but one thing's for certain, we cannot live without water. Without water, there is no joint lubrication. Without water, there is no nourished brain. Without water, there is no humanity. Without water, there is no earth. We need to protect our water, save our water, wade in the water, 'cause we can't live without water. If you had suddenly no access to water, what would you do? How would you live? Because me, when I think about the Nile River and what it's done for me, yeah. When I think about water and how it set us free, I just dance, sing, yell, scream, water, 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 water. Thank you, that's great. So I wrote that piece. It's a longer, much longer piece of my memory. It's like jumping all the other lines. It's about 15 minutes. I was like, I'm not gonna do that to you, but water's clearly important to the earth, right?
Yes.
This next piece, so I'm from a place called Gary, Indiana, in East Chicago, Indiana, in Northwest Indiana. And typically when I would go back to my hometown, I would meet up with some of the people from my high school, which was a performing arts school, and I would make them dance or sing or whatever their creative art practice was. And this time they flipped the script on me and was like, Miss Latrice, we want you to create a poem for us. And so I was like, okay. And so we were at the beach and I was just listening and watching, and two of the people that I was with, they were choreographers and dancers, and this is the piece that came about from that. It's called Let's Go to the Beach. Shout our praise, arms raised, rotate them backwards, jeté, jeté, presenting memories tucked inside aging youth, leaping into waves of ocean blues, hiding behind palm trees made Capri Sun. Free spirits run so they're lifted higher and higher with every disappearing sun ray. We're treading ice cold water, relaxing our caramelized arms, bothered still, stuck with stiff chills, trying to disregard the harm that we've been subject to for years, trying to stop ancient tears by remembering how we used to love, how we used to do this, used to do that. Tap, tap, clap, let me hear you. Tap, tap, clap, uh-huh. Tap, tap, clap. One more time. Tap, tap, clap. Surrounded by Earth's war chants, the sound of rocks trapped under never-ending seas. Ooh, 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 ooh. A resilient, slight breeze, connecting liberated dancing limbs, moving forwards 3, 4 times backwards, tossed center sand stage, pressing deeply into laughing turns. It begins where they stand at first enraged, then bittersweetly engaged, stand, point, retrograde, point, toes stuck in tan, blue whitewashed shores, doors opening graciously for pink-turned, love yourself brown ballet slippers that never needed America's approval ties. Our chests open to cloudy, limitless skies in the background, and 2 jet skis interrupt nature's rehearsal. Heads bowed, eyes closed, music imitated in da-da-dee-dap-dap, da-da-dee-dap-dap, turn, 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 drop, da-da-dee-dap-dap, da-da-dee-dap-dap, turn, 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 drop. And someone saying, work your body, work your hips.
Work your body, work your hips.
Someone's playing favorite Chris Rock special while opportunistic seagulls are floating along, flying over Miller's best attraction. And choreographers Marco and Jazz are yelling, here we go, 1, 2, hands up, don't move, hands up, don't shoot the messenger. Hey, 1, 2, hands up, don't move, hands up, don't shoot the messenger. And I'm not here to mess with the flow. So I'm trying to not let the setting orange-yellow contrast be a distraction, blinded by agape's unconditional interactions, distant dialogue whispered, but heard like shouts. This is crazy. This water is cold. I can't hold this forever now, Marco. Wish this feeling would last forever now. Looking up, I see the classic divide, red, purple, highlighter yellow, drifting clouds separated by the blue, gray, black, and white puffy ones. And dragonflies still in the sun, I see you. Blood-sucking mosquitoes, I hear you too. And Steel City, I remember you in every backstroke, every pen stroke, in every poem he wrote, in every form she spoke, tongue twisting in and out of their fallen metaphors. Gary's untold story opened doors. Lehigh Valley too. Don't let him tell you another lie story. Legacy lives here. We are MJ's steps warped in the they don't really care about us atmosphere, tasked to be free at last, free at last. Yes, Martin, we found our freedom fast in the past, proudly masked, still answering the ones who always ask. If we have no stash, no currency, how could we possibly be free? To which I answered hurriedly, because money brings worries, and we'd much rather spend our time encouraging and uplifting positive energies, combating negativity with a simple gesture that can only be measured by the one who offers it as a resistance to negate all hate. And dare I say, love unconditionally. You all say that? Love unconditionally. So what do you say? Can we go to the beach today? Yeah. And this last one is more just as a indulge me, if you will. Those who know me, when I tell you happy birthday, it's not just B-I-R-T-H-D-A-Y or B-Day. I actually say happy B-Earth Day. This is my reminder to celebrate Earth Day every day. And so if you all would please indulge me by singing this song with me. It's the happy birthday song, but instead of birthday, you just say happy B-Earth Day. All right, we ready? 3, 2, 1. Happy Earth Day to me. There you go. Happy Earth Day to me. Happy Earth Day to me. Happy Earth Day.
now it's my turn. So hold on to your whiskers. The story that I would like to share with you comes from the Mabinogion. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, it is the text of ancient Wales, and the stories that are contained in there were considered in English youth stories or stories for youth, but it wasn't because they were children's stories. It was because they were the core of the stories that the storytellers and bards would need to learn to start on their journey into that profession. And the story that I would like to share with you from that is called Lludd and Levisli and the Three Plagues. And this story resonated with me because it is about good stewardship and what good leadership is in the face of what we're seeing leadership in doing today. So the story starts with the Isle of Ancient Britain. And Ancient Britain consisted of the Old North, which was Scotland, Wales, England, underneath that the English Channel, and below that, not part of the Isle of Britain, but below that was France or Gaul. The king in those days was King Beli, and King Beli had 3 sons, Lludd, Casawund, and Niwen. There was also a 4th son named Levisli, who was both discreet and wise. Now it happened that when King Beli passed on, that the kingdom was inherited by the oldest son, who became King Lludd. And this made absolute perfect sense because in having the kingdom pass on to the eldest son, it meant that the kingdom stayed unified and could keep growing. And so Lludd became the king. And he ruled well, and he ruled wisely with his advisors, with the princes, and the Isle of Britain just prospered, and the people were happy. And news soon came that the king of France or Gaul had just passed on, leaving just a daughter, the princess. And Levisli went to Lludd and said, I would love your blessing to go to France and to ask to wed the princess and thereby become king of France. And Lludd, who loved his brother, of course gave him his blessing, gave him everything that he would need, a fleet and treasure and strong-armed guards and a force behind him. And Levisli went to France, and the advisors and counselors there were thrilled to have him, and he married the princess and became the king of France, and he was a good king and a wise king, and the people in France prospered. And so we have the king of the Isle of Britain, who is doing wonderfully wonderful, and we have the king of France, who is doing wonderfully wonderful, and that can't possibly be how things keep going, or we don't have a story. And it came to pass that 3 plagues came upon the Isle of Britain, 3 scourges. The first was a group of people, Kiernanians, who were magic folk, and they sowed seeds of doubt and fear and division among the people. And what was worse than that was that they had the ability to hear any word that touched the wind, any word that came forth and touched the air was known by this group of people so that nothing could be done to stop them. They knew about it before anything could take place to make any kind of change. The second plague was a screeching that came down into the hearths of every household in May. And the screeching was so shrill and so terrifying that it made the men grow weak and pale. It caused the women to lose their babies. And it caused the young men and the young women to go mad. But no one knew where the screeching came from. The third plague was strangest, perhaps strangest of all. There would be feast days that would last for days, weeks, sometimes months, and an abundance of food would be set out in the royal halls, enough to last for days and weeks and months. But by the end of the first day of the feast, after people had eaten their fill and food was still laid out for the following days, the people would go to sleep or go home. And in the morning, there wouldn't be a drop of food anywhere to be found. And where the food went, no one knew. Well, the counselors and the advisors came together with Lud, and they spoke of these things, and they tried to come up with different solutions to these problems, but they couldn't come up with anything, nothing that would work. And so it was agreed that Lud should go and speak with Levisley, the discreet and wise. And so Lud called together a fleet of ships with his strong-armed men, and together they set sail going across the English Channel towards France. And Levisley, he knew, for he was prescient, that Lud was on his way, and he himself gathered his own fleet. And together with his men, they started to move out to meet Lud. And then the two brothers moved away from their fleets of ships, moving together, just the two ships side by side. And when Lud and Levisley met in that realm removed from everything there on the open sea, they fell onto one another's necks and hugged as brothers who loved each other should. And then they began to discuss, in a certain way, what should be done about these plagues that were the scourge of the Isle of Britain. Levisley held up a finger to his lips, meaning, do not speak. And together the two brothers went and sat down, and Levisley pulled from his robe a speaking tube of silver, a long tube with a funnel at the end, as people used to use so that they could hear in private in rooms that were crowded. And so Levisley motioned for Lud to speak through the tube, and he would listen. But when Levisley put the tube up, the funnel up to his ear, he heard profanity and all kinds of coarse language. And he looked in that tube, and what did he see but a little imp in there? And so you know he did what was the only thing you could do if you have an imp in your speaking tube, was he got the very best meat and poured it through and washed that imp right out of that tube. And so the two brothers began to speak. They began to speak softly, quietly, just using the tube and using sign gestures, hand gestures. And for the first plague of the Kieranians, those seed sowers of doubt who were causing such division among the people, Levisley instructed how Lud must bruise certain insects and mix them with herbs and water, and to take with him additional of these insects to breed them so that he would always have them on hand. And he told Lud he must sprinkle this potion, this brew over all the people, and it would rid them of the plague of the evildoers without doing any harm at all to the citizens of Britain. For the second plague, the second scourge, that of the shrieking and the shrill noises that terrified everyone in May, he was to measure from north to south, from east to west, and find the very center of the Isle of Britain. Then he was to have dug there a great pit, and in this great pit to set a great stone coffin, and to fill this coffin with the very best mead. Mead is good for so many things. And over top of this to lay out a great silk sheet. And that he himself, Lud himself, must sit there and wait and watch in order to be rid of the second scourge. As for the third one, for the third plague, he was to have put near himself in the feasting hall a great tub of ice-cold water. And when he felt himself becoming drowsy, he was to plunge himself bodily headfirst into this water so as to shock him back awake. And now with these instructions, Lud went back to the Isle of Britain, and he had the insects and he bruised them and he mixed them with the herbs and the water, and he himself went to every village and town and he sprinkled the potion over the people there, and the Quarians were gone and their magic was dispelled, and so the first plague was gone. For the second he measured to the very center from north to south, east to west, and found that that place was in Oxford. And he caused for a great pit to be dug up, and to have that stone coffin put inside, filled with mead and covered with silk. And he stayed there, Lud stayed there, and he waited. And on that May Eve, the screeching started. The hissing and the scraping and the sounding as if biting was going on. And there appeared in the sky before him great animals that were biting and clawing and fighting one another. And this went on for a long time, and it made the hairs on the back of Lud's neck stand up. But he stayed there and he waited and he watched, because it was his duty to do that very thing. And the animals transformed, and they became two great dragons, a red one and a white one. And the two clawed and bit at each other, and though it appeared that the red dragon was losing the battle, things turned around, and it was the red that began to best the white. And still they fought, and there was a transformation yet again. And now they transformed into two pigs, signs of prosperity. And the two pigs slowly lowered down onto the top of that silk coverlid and into the mead, and they began to sup up the mead and became drowsy and full, and the two pigs fell asleep, having drunk up the mead that was in that place. And when they were asleep, Lud ordered that the men around him should all come together and wrap up the pigs in the silk, and to transport that stone coffin with the pigs in it to Dinas Emrys, which is a very sacred place in Wales. and to have it buried there. And what happens next with them is another story, but for now that is where they are staying. And so that was the end of the second plague. And now there was one more left. And so Lud called to have that icy, icy cold water, that icy bath put beside him in the feasting hall. And he sat there. He sat there waiting. And when his eyes began to grow heavy and to close, he plunged himself headlong into that icy cold water and was shocked awake at once. And being awake now, he looked, and there he saw a knight who was also a magician, an evil knight. And the knight walked around with a magical hamper into which he scooped up and put in all of the food, weeks worth, months worth, into that hamper that never grew an inch, never weighed an ounce more, until it was nearly all of it gone. But Lud jumped up and began to fight with this knight. And the two of them went cuff to cuff, fist to fist, until Lud bested that great knight and pinned him down. And the knight cried out for mercy and begged for his life and promised that if Lud would spare him, that he would forever be his most faithful servant. And Lud, because he was a good leader, had mercy. And he let the knight go. And the knight was with him all the days of his life as his faithful friend and companion. And in this way, Lud cured the 3 plagues of the ancient Isle of Britain and has given us an example of what it is to be a truly great leader who cares for the minds, bodies, and spirits of his subjects and fellow creatures. You have got Charles Kiernan, Ingrid Bohn, Miss Latrice, Darrell Parry, Nancy Scott, Larry Sceurman, I don't know if you know him or not over there, Jim Sear.
It hasn't turned off.
We need some this way. There we go. Yeah.